This isn't the chronicle I ever envisioned myself sharing. But when the person you've poured your soul into simply vanishes, only to reappear months later convinced you're the ghost, your grip on reality begins to fray. What if the one person you trusted most was living an elaborate lie? It started, as all modern tragedies do, with a digital ping, an email, stark and unadorned, from Thalia Ashford. No warm greeting, no signature, just the chilling subject line. I ended it. There I sat, Finn Kalen, in a threadbare sweater that still carried the scent of her lavender laundry detergent, my coffee growing cold, completely adrift. Ended what? The obvious answer should have screamed at me, but when your wife has ghosted you for 3.5 months, your mind plays cruel tricks, editing the truth to protect its fragile shell. You learn to navigate the vacuum. You tell colleagues she's on an extended creative retreat. You keep the porch light burning. You don't dare delete her organic almond shampoo from the endless grocery list in your phone. Then that one-line email, a brutal punch to the gut. Thalia had evaporated one crisp Thursday morning while I was brushing my teeth, leaving her keys on the hall table, the front door ajar, and my world utterly untethered. No farewell note, no whispered argument, just an echoing absence. And then, the silence. I searched relentlessly. I called until my fingers ached. I even reached out to her estranged sister, Alara, who offered a chilling prophecy. She warned you, Finn. You just never truly listened. But I had, hadn't I? Every sigh, every fleeting complaint, every time she'd murmured, I feel like I'm disappearing. I just hadn't grasped she meant disappearing from me. Now she was back in my inbox at least, confirming the termination of some faceless affair I'd never had the chance to confront. And the clinical way she'd written it, like canceling a subscription. I ended it. I made a mistake. I want to talk. As if 3 months of total abandonment could be neatly tidied up with a conversation. But here's the most agonizing part, the one I replay in my nightmares. I answered. With hands that trembled, I clicked reply when every fiber of my being screamed to hit delete, to block her number, to erase her from my digital existence. I didn't. And what unfolded next? That string of emails, the ill-fated meeting, the gut-wrenching truth of why she'd returned, demolished every foundation I'd built about Thalia, and more profoundly, about myself. Ready to learn the shocking truth that reshaped my entire world? She proposed meeting at the Roost, a downtown cafe known for its perpetually under-roasted beans and mismatched thrift store furniture. Not our quiet apartment, not the secluded park where we'd shared countless Sunday mornings. Nowhere that might expose her vulnerability. I hadn't laid eyes on her since the morning she vanished. I'd conjured that moment 1,000 times, her eyes brimming with guilt, perhaps tears, certainly regret. But when I stepped into the clatter of ceramic cups and hushed conversations, she was already seated, idly scrolling on her phone, sipping an iced beverage as if waiting for a rideshare, not her abandoned husband. I stood there, a full minute ticking by, before her gaze finally lifted. Finn, she smiled, a disarmingly casual smile, as though we'd merely bumped into each other at the local market. You look, well, I felt like a specter. That morning, I'd cycled through 3 different shirts, wrestling with the impossible question of who I was supposed to be for this encounter. Furious, aloof, wounded, polished. I'd settled on crumpled and quiet. She, however, radiated an almost serene calm, as if the preceding storm had bypassed her entirely. I slid into the chair opposite her. She gestured with her drink, a coconut milk concoction. I shook my head. Thalia, I finally managed, my voice raspy. You left me. I woke up, and you were simply gone. I know, she murmured, nodding a fraction too quickly. That's why I asked to talk. But she didn't talk. Not right away. She toyed with her straw, her eyes flitting around the room, skillfully avoiding mine. When she finally spoke, it wasn't a confession. It was a carefully constructed narrative. A story about her desperate need for clarity, about how Caden Delaney, yes, him again, wasn't the man she'd imagined, how he'd grown possessive, controlling, suffocatingly jealous of her every move. She insisted he'd never raised a hand to her, but that she'd felt erased. The bitter irony nearly choked me. "You once said, 'I erased you,'" I reminded her, the words tasting like ash. "I know," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "And I was wrong. You were just consistent. I mistook safety for suffocation. I should have stood up then. I should have tossed my untouched, probably burnt-tasting coffee into the nearest bin and walked out with whatever tattered remnants of my dignity remained. Instead, I leaned forward and uttered the most foolish question of my life. Why now?" That's when her expression shifted, settling into a look I'd never seen before. Not at our wedding, not even when she'd first hinted at the affair. I couldn't name it. Desperation, perhaps. Or perhaps cold, hard calculation. She said, "Because I think I might be pregnant, and I don't know whose it is." Every sound in the cafe ceased. The world tilted, the lights in my mind dimming. All I could process was that she hadn't come back for me. She'd returned with a plan, and I was clearly a vital component. I stared across the small table, my face a mask, struggling to keep it from crumbling. Pregnant. She might be pregnant, and not only that, she admitted she didn't know whose child it was. My heart didn't just shatter, it twisted into an unrecognizable knot. I wasn't angry, nor was I sad. I was something far worse. Numb. The kind of profound numbness where you can't even feel your own hands anymore. Can you imagine a betrayal that cuts so deep it leaves you emotionally paralyzed? And then she articulated the unthinkable. "I need you to tell people it's yours." I blinked, convinced I'd misheard. "What?" She took a slow, deliberate breath, set down her drink and leaned in, her voice dropping as if we were co-conspirators plotting a daring heist. "If it's Caden's, he'll try to get involved. He's not safe. You once said you'd protect me no matter what. I need you to say it's yours. Just until I know for sure. Just until the baby's born." I actually laughed. It emerged as a guttural choke. "So you want me to pretend I got my runaway wife pregnant? The same wife who ghosted me for months? The same one who didn't even bother to say goodbye? The same woman who cheated on me with a married man and now needs a character witness?" She didn't flinch. She simply said, "Yes." There was no desperation in her eyes, only strategy. I wasn't her husband. I was a clean name, a soft place to land. A man whose loyalty she'd tested 1,000 times and who had, to my shame, never truly walked away. She believed I'd roll over again. She bet on my silence, my softness, my weakness. But she bet wrong. Here's the absolute kicker, the part that still haunts me. I told her I'd think about it. I couldn't believe the words were coming out of my mouth, but some pathetic, broken part of me wasn't ready to seal that door. Not yet. It wasn't love. It was something far more demeaning, the desperate craving to feel needed by the very person who had broken me into a million pieces. She had ravaged my life, yet for a split second, I glimpsed a future again. Not one I wanted, but one I understood. That, perhaps, was the most terrifying realization of all. We left the cafe without a single touch. She brushed a fleeting kiss on my cheek before turning away, as if I were her confessor, not her spouse. As if she'd laid bare her sins and, in doing so, had been instantly absolved. That night, in my echoing apartment, her toothbrush still by the sink, her favorite wool coat hanging in the closet, I did what any broken man does when he refuses to admit it's truly over. I went digging. I began with her dormant social media profile, no posts in months, then her sister Alara's, nothing revealing there either. But then a flicker of memory, something trivial, forgotten. Caden Delaney had once liked one of my vacation photos years ago. I typed his name into the search bar, and what I found turned my stomach cold. A post from just 3 days prior, a sonogram image accompanied by a saccharine caption. "Can't wait to meet you, little guy. Shakur, blessed Shakur family, wash your love." The comments beneath were overflowing with congratulations, including one from Thalia's own account. Our greatest adventure yet, accompanied by a crimson heart emoji. Our, not mine. So why had she asked me to claim the baby? In 7 days, your life could change, but not always for the better. Sleep was an impossibility that night. I sat fixated on that sonogram post, rereading her comment, our greatest adventure yet, again and again. My ex-wife openly celebrating her child with the very man she claimed to have left. The man she'd painted as dangerous, controlling, a threat to her baby's well-being. Yet here she was, gushing in public comments, tagging him in hearts and baby emojis, all while asking me to publicly claim responsibility for her unborn child. The question echoed relentlessly. Why would she want me involved at all? Why pretend it's mine if she's still with him? The next morning, I moved through work like a zombie. Meetings were a blur, emails answered on autopilot. I dodged any conversation that wasn't strictly about numbers or spreadsheets. Inside, I was a churning mess of confusion, hurt, and, shamefully, a sliver of hope that I had misunderstood something. That night, I texted her. Saw the post. Are you still with him? 3 dots appeared, hovered, then vanished. Nothing. The following day, she materialized at my door. She was wearing one of her old, oversized sweaters, the navy one I'd bought her during our 3rd anniversary trip to the Rockies. She looked smaller, more fragile than I remembered, but I wasn't falling for it. I told you, she began softly. I ended it. I didn't respond. I simply opened the photo on my phone and held it out to her. She barely blinked. He posted that, she said, as if that singular statement should explain everything. I didn't want to make a scene. I'm not with him. Not anymore. So the comment? I pressed. I had to keep the peace. He watches everything. I struggled to breathe. I couldn't discern what was real and what was performance anymore. Was I speaking to the woman I'd loved? Or a master manipulator so adept at deception that even she couldn't distinguish between the truth and her carefully crafted lies? She settled onto my couch, as if it were still hers. She spoke about the baby, mumbling about legal ambiguities and the need for lawyers. Then, with almost chilling nonchalance, she dropped the next bombshell. I listed you as the emergency contact at the hospital. My mouth went dry. You what? I needed someone I could trust. If anything goes wrong, they'll call you. You can get to the baby before he does. I rose to my feet. You're not making me the father, Thalia. You're making me your shield. She didn't deny it. She just looked up at me, her gaze unwavering, and whispered, You were always the safe choice. Here's what no one tells you about betrayal. It's rarely a sudden blow. It's a slow, calculated suffocation. I wanted to scream, to smash something, but all I could do was collapse back onto the couch. Because part of me, the broken, spineless, ashamed part of me, still clung to the desperate hope of being needed. Still wanted to believe there was some twisted redemption arc in all of this, that I could somehow save her, or fix us. But I was wrong, because 3 days later, a letter arrived from her lawyer. I wasn't just her emergency contact. She had listed me as the presumed father on the hospital documents without my consent. And legally, that meant I could be liable for everything, from medical bills to child support. I wasn't just a shield. I was the scapegoat. Stop! Read this before moving on. Your understanding of manipulation is about to be shattered. What I did next will either make you pity me or finally respect me. I wish I could tell you I stormed straight to a lawyer's office, solving everything with a dramatic signature and a fiery speech. I wish I could say I stood up for myself like characters in movies do, ripping up the letter, dramatically tossing it into the trash, and slamming the door on her manipulative chapter forever. But that's not what happened. Because people like me, people who overthink everything, who instinctively blame themselves first, we don't act. We freeze. For nearly a week, I carried that insidious envelope in my laptop bag like it was radioactive. I reread it countless times, in the break room at work, in my car, in bed. I Googled terms I didn't understand: presumed paternity, voluntary acknowledgement, putative father registry. I was spiraling into a vortex of legal jargon while my life was disintegrating around me. Then the second, more vicious blow landed. Caden Delaney reached out. An Instagram message request. No words, just a screenshot. It was a copy of a text Thalia had sent him. If you try to take me to court, he will testify I was with him the whole time. Don't forget who's listed on the paperwork. I read it 3 times before the horrifying realization dawned. He was me. She wasn't just trying to hide the baby from him. She was using me as undeniable proof of her innocence in some tangled legal quagmire I couldn't even begin to comprehend. I wasn't merely the fallback guy. I was the built-in alibi, her human decoy. This isn't just about betrayal. It's about being weaponized. And that's when something inside me finally, irrevocably cracked. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I simply got up. I pulled on my shoes. I walked 4 blocks in the rain to the only lawyer I knew, a friend of a coworker's cousin. His office smelled of mildew and stale coffee, but I didn't care. I laid everything out for him, the message, the hospital paperwork, the lawyer's letter. I told him the entire humiliating story, my voice trembling, my palms sweating, the shame spilling out like a dam that had finally burst. He didn't interrupt me once. He just listened, his expression a calm, awful mask of recognition, as if I were the 100th man to walk into his office wearing that exact same emotional lamp. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and said, "She's clever, not ethical, but clever." "Can she actually do this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "She already did," he replied, "but we can fight it. You'll need documentation, proof that your relationship was over, messages where she names the real father. Anything that disconnects you from the timeline of conception. It's not impossible, Finn, but it's going to be a war." A war? That word reverberated through my skull the entire walk home. I'd never wanted war. I'd craved peace. I'd wanted her. Or perhaps the idealized version of her I'd constructed in my mind. The one who loved me for who I was, not for what I could cover up. That night, sleep evaded me once more. But this time, I finally did something useful. I printed every email, every text, every screenshot. I backed up voicemails. I compiled every shred of proof I possessed, not for revenge, not even solely for justice, but because for the first time in months, I realized I wasn't just protecting myself anymore. I was protecting whoever came next. And if she thought she could use me to rewrite her story, she was about to discover I'd started writing my own. Sometimes the most broken among us find the unexpected strength to fight back. I barely recognized him at first. Clean-shaven, impeccably suited, an aura of icy composure. But when he strode into the courtroom, glancing around as if he already owned the place, a cold knot tightened in my gut. That was Caden, the man who had shattered my marriage, paraded baby announcements, and now entered a legal arena as if I were the villain and he the aggrieved party. Thalia sat on the opposite side of the courtroom. She didn't look at me, not once. She wore a simple gray dress and that same unreadable expression, a disconcerting blend of boredom and performance. You would never guess the emotional devastation she'd left in her wake. You would never know she had turned 2 men into unwitting weapons, waiting to see who fired first. How many lives can one person shatter before anyone catches on? It wasn't a trial, not yet. It was a preliminary hearing designed to determine paternity claims, hospital liability, and whether I'd be legally bound to a child that was unequivocally not mine. But the instant Caden entered the room, events veered in a direction I hadn't anticipated. He requested to speak. Now I thought I'd witnessed manipulation. I thought Thalia was the grand architect of deceit. But Caden? He was an entirely different species. He didn't rage. He didn't accuse. He played the victim so convincingly that for a terrifying moment, I almost believed him myself. He recounted a tale of how Thalia had convinced him I was abusive, that I had trapped her in a loveless marriage, that she had fled for her very safety. He conjured a version of me I didn't recognize. Controlling, cold, volatile. He claimed she'd only returned to me out of fear, and that I had coerced hospital staff into listing myself on the documents. Then, like a magician unveiling his greatest trick, he produced a printout, an email from a burner address signed with my name. It declared, "Back off. This baby's mine now." My mouth went instantly dry. The judge looked at me. My lawyer, Julian, leaned in and whispered, "Don't react. He's playing a dangerous game." But I couldn't help it. My voice cracked as I blurted, "I didn't write that. That's not me." Caden merely shrugged as if he expected nothing less. "Of course not. Nothing ever is, right?" And then it hit me, with the force of a physical blow. They were still working together, Thalia and Caden. This wasn't a messy love triangle. It was an elaborate trap. They had meticulously transformed me into a character in their twisted narrative. And now I was the perfect scapegoat for a child, a web of lies and a courtroom circus I had never ever signed up for. After the hearing, as I walked out, Thalia finally met my gaze. Just one fleeting glance. It wasn't fueled by hatred or even guilt, but a quiet, chilling acknowledgement, as if she were silently stating, "You were never supposed to fight back." That night I sat at my kitchen table, staring at that forged email, and I realized the real fight hadn't even begun. Because if they were willing to fabricate threats, twist narratives, and turn me into a legal decoy, what else were they planning? I'd never considered myself tech savvy. I'm the kind of person who once called IT because I couldn't locate the power button on a new monitor. But desperation transforms a person. And after the courtroom ambush, after being accused of sending threats I never wrote, after watching Caden play the innocent while Thalia feigned ignorance, something inside me snapped. I stopped feeling embarrassed. I stopped apologizing. I started digging. The first thing I did was revisit the burner email Caden had mentioned. Obviously, I hadn't created it, but I knew how he'd try to make it seem like I had. Using my name in the email address, mimicking my writing style, even referencing details only someone close to me would know. But he'd missed something crucial, something infinitesimally small. The IP address linked to that account didn't match mine, not even remotely. It originated from a town just over the county line, a place neither of us inhabited, but it jogged a fragmented memory. Thalia's old apartment, the one she'd rented before we got married. I recalled her bragging about keeping the lease in her name, just in case. That place was now serving as a digital ghost town, a secure haven to spin narratives and conceal traps. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I emailed the burner account, not to accuse but to provoke. "I have everything. We need to talk. Meet me tomorrow or it all goes public." I didn't truly expect a reply, but one materialized within the hour. "Who is this?" It was sloppy, too quick, too panicked. No threat, no denial, just stark uncertainty. More than 95% of people miss this simple trick to uncover hidden truths. I took the next critical step. I reached out to an old college friend, Julian Hughes, who had once helped me salvage a wiped hard drive after a regrettable tea-spilling incident. He now worked in digital forensics. I explained I had a deeply personal situation. I didn't disclose every detail, but enough for him to understand this wasn't mere curiosity. He diligently traced metadata from the burner emails, cross-referenced browser fingerprints, and within 2 days handed me a folder. Inside were cached login locations, device IDs, and something that made my blood run cold. Caden's name and Thalia's tied to the very same backup cloud storage. It wasn't just one burner account. There were 3, meticulously utilized to fabricate messages, some impersonating me, others posing as anonymous tips. There was even one masquerading as a nurse from the hospital, falsely implying I had claimed paternity in person. They hadn't merely dragged my name through the mud, they had constructed an entire false reality around it. Thalia hadn't returned seeking help or redemption. She had come back to meticulously construct a narrative where I was the willing father, the convenient backup plan, the legally useful pawn. I sat in the darkness that night, listening to the monotonous hum of the refrigerator, feeling the immense weight of it all settle deep within me. I had trusted her, I had loved her, and she had callously used that love as her clean exit route. But it wasn't going to end like that. because I finally had proof. Not feelings, not speculation, not accusations. Undeniable proof. The courtroom was colder this time, quieter. No dramatic entrances, no smug glances across the aisle. Just me, Julian, and a folder so thick it seemed to possess its own distinct heartbeat. The judge took her seat, her gaze sweeping over the file we had submitted the previous night. A comprehensive forensic report, a meticulously constructed timeline, detailed metadata, 3 distinct burner email accounts, all demonstrably created from the same network ID. A tangled web of lies, painstakingly traced, labeled, and laid bare for all to see. Thalia sat frozen, her face an unreadable mask. Caden, for once, had shed his composure. He leaned forward excessively, fidgeted, whispered urgently to his lawyer, who notably offered no whispered replies. Julian rose first, methodically guiding the court through each piece of evidence. The forged emails, the damning cloud backup links, even the casual, callous messages they had exchanged, joking about how effortlessly they could retrain a puppy like Franklin. The judge didn't interrupt. She simply continued flipping pages, her expression hardening with each revelation. Then came the definitive moment, the DNA petition, because in all their meticulous plotting, they had overlooked one undeniable fact. Legal paternity can be challenged. And in the test results we had filed that very morning, I wasn't the father, not even close. The judge sighed, her gaze shifting between Thalia and Caden, and uttered one word I will carry with me forever. Unbelievable. Within minutes, the paternity claim against me was dismissed. The forged documents were immediately flagged for criminal review. My name was cleared. I walked out of that courtroom not just free of them, but free of the suffocating weight I had carried for far too long. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I wasn't ashamed of how I had loved. I was proud I had survived it. My hands were trembling as I realized the immense power of truth. 2 months later, I relocated to a new city, a fresh canvas. No lingering ghosts, no painful reminders. I started volunteering at a legal aid clinic, specifically for individuals ensnared in domestic traps similar to mine. Because you'd be astonished at how frequently love, or the semblance of it, gets weaponized. And slowly, painstakingly, piece by piece, I began to construct a new life. One where no one dares call me weak for being kind. One where I get to define, on my own terms, what true strength genuinely means. Sometimes being perceived as the weakest is precisely what grants you the resilience to outlast the storm. What's a moment in history where someone turned an utterly hopeless situation around? Share your thoughts below. Let's fill this space with stories of unexpected comebacks and quiet, hard-won victories.